I've been riding the streets on two wheels for over 20 years. Around a decade ago, I had a quad, but the limitations on usage caused me to trade it for a car around that time. With the exception of a friend's mini bike as a kid, riding two wheels off pavement was like a foreign language. Here on the east coast of Massachusetts, there's extreme limitations for off-road vehicles. I've been talking about adventure bikes for a couple of years. I've always loved the appeal of being able to go anywhere at any time. Joe beat me to the punch with a 2008 Yamaha TW200 he got from his father-in-law. The dream seemed out of reach until Honda released the XR150L here in the United States. This small CC carbureted dual sport had a lot of appeal for me, especially in the price. I bought this bike at the beginning of the year. It was the dumbest and smartest thing I have ever done. Back in April, Joe and I tested the waters with a small section of the BDR in New Hampshire. This made the itch for off-road adventure radiate. We began talking about the BDR-X in Pennsylvania. Our friends all became interested in the adventure that we were chasing. Sean was the first one to leap at the chance. He heard about our ambitions and ran to the dealership. And just like I did, he signed his life away. Fast forward, this was actually happening. Trying to find information was a little tougher than we expected with the growing popularity of this route. Our goal was to do the whole thing in 3 days. With zero knowledge about the area, we began laying out the map. The rough estimate seemed to be about 170 miles or so on day 1 and day 2, and around 190 miles on day 3. It seemed achievable, at least we hoped. We threw the recommendations of hotels and starting points out the window. We started to plan our own way. It was Thursday at noon. I punched out of work and raced home to meet the guys. They were already at my house loading up their bikes in the truck. The hitch carrier was bolted onto the truck, followed by my bike. We had a 7.5-hour drive to our starting point, Little Pine State Park, midway between section 1 and 2. We arrived around 9 p.m. We quickly set up camp and scoffed down some dinner. 6 a.m. was going to be here before we knew it. As the sun was rising, the camp was silent, except for the sound of the running stream behind our tents. We tried to quietly unload the bikes and pack our gear without waking any of our neighbors. This was the first camping trip we had taken on these machines. It was much different than the choppers me and Joe are used to, and the Goldwing Sean primarily rides. Packing them was a lesson to be learned. We headed north following the downloaded GPX file on my phone. We had no idea what to expect. There were endless hills and winding mountain roads, almost all bordered with rocky streams. Joe took a spill early in the day. The road gremlins were out in full effect. This wore on our mental state, making sure he was okay to keep riding, and that his bike would keep carrying him and his gear the rest of the way. Luckily, it was just cosmetic damage to both. Play stupid games, win stupid prizes, they say. The first day, we underestimated a few things. Mostly, food stops. We should have packed more snacks or jumped on the opportunity for food earlier in the day. When you reside in a heavily populated area, you take for granted how accessible the amenities are. It was late afternoon, and we had finally found food. Time was not on our side. We still had some miles to go. We pushed on and finally arrived at Sizerville State Park, right before dark, our home for the night. Saturday morning. The dark rock-lined river flowed no more than a trickle. The bold green trees blocked out the creeping sunlight above. The temperature lingered just over 50 degrees as we packed up our lives yet again. We headed towards State College, Pennsylvania. This day of our journey had substantially more pavement than the previous. Unfortunately, Joe's heat shield shifted with a spill. His saddlebags melted, and the fear of losing gear made us search for a solution along the way. After a quick patch, we were back in action. The roads were much more fast-paced than the previous day. Our paths crossed with the dual sport men. They were fast on the trails. We allowed them to pass as they came up behind us. We navigated through the clouds of dust. As we stopped for a break, we chatted with a fellow rider who stated that there was over 300 bikes at this event. This was surprisingly the only section of road we encountered their participants. We stopped at a stone bridge for a jerky and trail mix break. Joe discovered that the eggs he packed from his chickens at home had broken in their holder in his bag. He rinsed his bag in the river below, and all of us took the time to wash the dust from our faces. It didn't take long to reach State College. We passed the Penn State Stadium and found a grocery store before retiring to the KOA that we had booked for the night. We set up camp, took advantage of the pool, and the site's ice cream social that was happening in the pavilion next door. We struck a match to light the fire. For the first time in 2 days, we had service at our campsite. Each of us called home. The guys lit cigars, and we relaxed as the nocturnal birds sang above us. Sunday morning started early as planned. I started the fire and began preparations for breakfast. Cinnamon buns, maple sausage patties, and blueberry muffins sizzled on the fire. Joe took the opportunity to go fishing while Sean went to the laundry facility to dry our swim clothes and his hoodie that his cooler leaked on the night before. We were prepared for the last leg of our adventure. Back to Little Pine Creek. The road was calling. Another cool morning was upon us. Gas, water, and snacks was the first task of the morning. We filled our tanks with fuel and our bags with food. We were heading into the last section of the trail. This particular trail had more technical sections and alternate routes than the previous 2 days. We met a couple of fellow riders at the gas station. These guys lived for this. We chatted for longer than we should have, but the conversation was good and we were all nerding out about the day ahead of us. We were close to the first alternate section. The road changed from gravel to baseball-sized rocks. After a few stops to restrap down our gear, we were finally in a groove. We had some large puddles, rocky downhill paths, and mud patches to cross. All of us paused to catch our breath at the end of the first trail. It was as satisfying as it was tiring. Yeah. After making our way back to the regular route, we pushed to get to the next technical section. The rocks bounced off our skid plates as our smiles stretched from ear to ear. We stopped at a vista overlook for what the guys began calling scenery beers. The day was going so well. Everything was smooth. The bikes were running great, with the exception of the occasional bag falling off the bikes. As the day went on, we began finding ourselves more cocky, as we ripped through the trails as the trees blurred past us. After a couple of almost washouts and close calls, the gremlins got me too. Joe dropped his bike trying to catch his fairing falling off the bike, a side effect from the previous wipeout. At the same time he was trying to gather himself, I hit a puddle followed by a mud patch. My bike crashed to the ground. I jumped up. I was riding with my camera around my neck. Smashing off the ground, my lens broke off at the mount. Luckily, the camera was fine. It's a risk I take having my camera so close and accessible. After the few minutes we needed to regain composure, we realized that the afternoon had snuck up on us. We only had a short section left back to our starting point. We made our way to the country store near our campground. They had a deli, and none of us felt like cooking. As we arrived back at Little Pine, a ranger came over to tell us that there was a 3-foot rattlesnake in the next site. I didn't even know they resided in Pennsylvania. After seeing deer, bears, and other wildlife along the trails throughout the weekend, a rattlesnake was the last thing we expected to see. We found that food was more of a necessity than setting up our camp. That could wait. The camp's facilities were well kept, and a shower would make relaxing much more enjoyable. I stripped my dusty clothes and cleaned the grime from my pores before retiring to my chair by the campfire. The crackling wood and flowing stream sang a siren song of sleep. Monday morning was much like the previous ones, an early calling to start the day. We packed up our gear for a final time and loaded the truck. Our muddy boots and dusty bags piled in the back seat. The bikes were strapped down to the truck in a sea of neon tie-downs. Home was just over 7 hours away. All of us plagued with fatigue and sore bodies. Yet we were still drunk from the adrenaline from the weekend. As quickly as it started, this trip had come to an end. Until the next one.